Hello, dear ones, and greetings from All Saints Orthodox Church, South Fairfax Road in Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is risen. I've been talking a lot about the prophet Elijah recently, and I wanted to share today a very, very short story about Elijah, the prophet, the Tishbite. After the challenge, right, when he basically challenged the 450 priests of Baal to a duel, as you'll recall, on Mount Carmel, and they lost. They actually lost more than the duel. They lost their lives as well. This made Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab, the king of Israel, so angry and enraged. Now, just let me give you a context. Jezebel was not a good person. She was a mess. And she had been violently persecuting and driving out the prophets of the true God. And so what Elijah did with this whole duel on Mount Carmel was to show the people that Jezebel's false gods, her Baal, and all the false gods were in fact false, and Yahweh, the God of Israel, is the true God. Okay, so Elijah won the duel, the priests of Baal lost their lives, and Jezebel became enraged. And so she sent a message to Elijah to tell him, basically, that she was going to hunt him down and he'd be gone within 24 hours. He'd be dead. And so he heard this news and he fled in fear for his life. And he went way out into the desert and he found a broom tree, as we remember from other Elijah stories. And as he sat down under the broom tree, he asked the Lord to take his life. He was in such a miserable place. Now, this is a man who had raised the dead. This is a man who had called down fire from heaven. I mean, this is a man who had done amazing and incredible things working with God. And here he is being chased down by this queen, fearing for his life, and he's asking God to take his life. He's saying, "It is enough." Those are his words. "It is enough. I'm no better than my fathers before me. I ask you to end my life." That's what his prayer was to God. So he lies down in exhaustion under the broom tree and goes to sleep. And he's awakened by an angel. And the angel wakes him up and he says, "Arise and eat." And so Elijah gets up and he looks, and here's this little bread cake that is has been baking on a coal fire, and there's a jar of water. So he eats the bread, he drinks the water, and he goes back to sleep. And then an angel wakes him again and says, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." So he gets up and he finds the bread and the water and he eats it and he drinks. And then he goes on this great journey. We're going to talk about the journey another day, but the point I want to make for today is this, that number one, Elijah, this man who, again, I said worked all of these miracles, and you can read all about them, who did these incredible things, he was a human being. And when it came down to it, he found himself frightened for his life, and he fled. He also was suffering terribly. You can tell he was suffering so much, right, that after fleeing for his life, he's praying for the Lord to end his life. He's suffering terribly. So nobody is beyond suffering. Nobody is beyond fear in that sense. But then the other thing I wanted to say was this, that even in the midst of all this fear and this suffering and this fleeing, the Lord is providing for him. The Lord knows what is coming, right? The Lord knows what is going to happen. The Lord knows about the journey that Elijah doesn't know that he's going to take yet, because God hasn't told him what it is yet. And the Lord knows that he will need to be strengthened for that journey. And so the Lord provides for him. And so I just want to encourage each of us, when we are feeling alone, we're suffering, we're struggling, whatever it is that's going on, if we can see the Lord's hand in the midst of that, working to prepare us, to strengthen us, to help us to learn to rely upon him. We can't see what's coming next. We don't know what the future will hold. Much like Elijah, even though he was a prophet of God, in this case, God had this perfect vision of what was coming and knew the preparation that Elijah needed. So I encourage each of you, rely on God to prepare you, to sustain you, to give you, to build you up and give you what it is that you need for the journey ahead, the journey in life, because we don't know how long it is. We don't know where it'll take us. We don't know what will be required of us. But we do know that our calling is to be faithful and to trust God. Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen.